What's good, everybody? I appreciate y'all clicking on the video. I'm gonna do my best to stay focused and be on point with this. This is how to be perfect. This came from personal Bible study. I know y'all gonna see the title and be like, what is bro talking about? How you gonna tell me how to be perfect? This may feel all over the place and you might not understand everything in the beginning. Please just stick with me to the end. As I was reading it, I was coming to the conclusion, and some people may know this, but for me this was freeing, which is the whole reason I'm making the video. I was coming to the conclusion that Jesus was not perfect in the traditional sense that we think about perfection. I was always told and always thought, Jesus was perfect. Like, he did no wrong. Everything he did was right. There was no room for growth. Like, he was it from the day he came, and the day he died, he was it. And while that's true, as I was reading, I was starting to realize that it's not exactly what we think it is. Cool. I don't think Jesus could be perfect in the sense of what we think is perfect, like without any flaws or never needing correction or never being off base. That's at least how I thought of perfection. And I know I'm not the only one who thought of perfection like that. Jesus was a man, meaning he lived on earth, he walked on earth, he breathed, bled, he cried, like he was a physical man. You can consider Jesus to be 100% God and 100% man.
Combination.
As Jesus was going through his life, as he was getting towards the end, it almost felt like there was a war going on inside of him with his God nature and his man nature. And it was pulling and it was tugging and it was a lot going on inside of him. Not just 100% God, how we would think of him to be. So when I ran this past my man from my church, he told me that often when you're reading the Bible, you have to look at things from the original context that it came from, which is Hebrew. So in Hebrew, perfect or perfection can be called tamam or kalal, which means whole, sound, or complete. In the sense of completion, Jesus was perfect because he completed what he was intended to do. What do I mean by that? Okay. As Jesus was going along, he had to learn and grow from where he was, meaning that every step towards the cross, he was being made perfect. He was born with everything that he needed to do what God needed him to do. And we are born with everything that we need to be able to do what God needs us to do. On the path of that, we're being perfected. As they went, they were cleansed. Jesus was made perfect through his sacrifice on the cross. It even seems like at times God was testing Jesus to know that he could bear the weight of the cross for his kingdom. All right, I need to correct myself, because I don't think that God was testing Jesus for him to prove himself. I think he was testing him to use as an example for us on how to be tested. Just like how in the last video we were talking about how the devil was testing Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days. God allowed that testing to happen so that Jesus could be what he needed to be. And the same thing happens in our lives, where we will be tested so that we can be capable of accomplishing what it is that we need to in the life that we have. Another thing that I noticed, and this is what really got me, and look, I don't know everything. I can't possibly come on here and get everything right. But what I noticed as I was reading, over time, Jesus was getting less and less patient with the people that were around him, that he was speaking to and pouring into and preaching to, and weren't listening. And he said multiple times in multiple different ways, he's like, man, how much longer do I got to sit here and talk to y'all? How much do I have to sit here and tell y'all the same things? How long will I have to be among you all? And as I'm reading that, I'm like, okay, a perfect man isn't going to carry it like that. But that's just my perspective and my opinion. So I can't confidently say that or put a label on that saying that these are imperfect actions, because that's not sin. But from my understanding of perfection, that doesn't feel like perfect. And I feel like as people, we can have our understandings of perfection and then be hard on ourselves. Like, how am I sitting here being hard on Jesus about how he's responding to stuff?
My fault, OG.
If I'm going to be hard on Jesus about how he's handling stuff, how much harder am I going to be on myself, who's so less good than what Jesus actually is? It's again like you can see his humanity in how he's carrying each event, but he's still doing right because of that 100% God nature that he still has. But his patience was constantly being tested. He was passing the tests, and as he was passing the test, he was building up what he needed more and more so that he could complete his mission. Matthew 15:21-28 shows a woman who needs healing that Jesus starts off ignoring.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
And he eventually responds to her, telling her, I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel. But she came and worshiped him, pleading again, Lord, help me. Jesus responded, it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. She replied, that is true, Lord, but even dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their master's table. And then Jesus responded, dear woman, your faith is great, your request is granted, and she was instantly healed. To me, I read that from the perspective of Jesus wasn't going to heal her at first. He had no intention of healing her. He actually wasn't paying her any attention. He didn't want to shift focus from what he thought was more important because he know he came to save a specific group of people. The Gentiles, and that was a Gentile woman, were not his main focus. But the people who he really came to save were acting ungrateful half the time anyway. So this Gentile woman in this moment was able to open his eyes to the fact that, you know what, not just this specific group of people need to be saved. Everyone needs a savior. So the fact that Jesus could be moved off his stance, I can look at that and think that's an imperfect response. Why would you ignore a woman who needs healing because you're focused on a specific group of people? But I can't fully say that that's imperfect because he did end up healing the woman. But throughout that interaction, I think his mind was opened up to more than it had been before. So we might see perfection as somebody who sees or thinks of things 100% correctly every time. But that's not how Jesus started this interaction. But he ended in the right place. He did what he was supposed to do, but how he got there looks different than you would expect. Another thought. This is Luke 18:19. This is what Jesus said in response to a religious leader who was calling him good. Why do you call me good? Jesus asked him. Only God is truly good.
What do you mean by that?
But hold on, aren't you Jesus? Yes, but he's also man. And he's also on earth. It's a reason God doesn't live here on earth. So although Jesus was good, he's not truly good as God is. And I think Jesus is aware of his human nature, which is why he's saying that. He constantly directed his actions and words back towards God in the kingdom of heaven. This is John 5:19. Jesus gave them this answer. Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. This is John 8:28. So Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. He was perfect in his obedience. That's what made Jesus perfect. We can apply that to ourselves because our path is never going to be perfect. Our responses to everything is never going to be perfect, but we can control our obedience. And if we want to get the most out of our lives and be the best that we possibly can, it starts with obedience. So perfection can be directly in line with obedience to God. And I'm typing in my notes like my fingers are on fire. Like I'm just typing and typing and typing. I'm like, dang, I'm really starting to realize how hard I can be on myself, or how people can have these expectations and think it's one thing or think it's another. And in reality, you just need to be obedient. Obedience is so important because without it, we can put ourselves in positions that aren't beneficial to our purpose without realizing. Jesus made it clear he's not what's good. He's just following the instructions of his Father. Just because something is good doesn't mean it's good for you. You can do something good at the wrong time and it be received negatively. You can be doing something wrong in the eyes of the people around you and it still be right in the eyes of God. You can have a good job or be presented with a good opportunity that can distract you from what God actually needs from you. But being obedient protects you from all of that. When this really started to set in was when Jesus was predicting his death again in verses 31. This is still in Luke 18. He took the disciples aside and let them know all the predictions of the prophets were about to come true. What tripped me out here, Jesus is talking about himself as the Son of Man in the third person. So if I'm a disciple and I'm sitting here listening to Jesus talk about himself in the third person, and that's why I say as the time is getting closer and closer for the resurrection, it's almost like Jesus is going crazy, but it's like his man side and his God side are constantly clashing, and death has to happen for all of that to stop. In verse 32, this is Jesus talking about himself, saying he will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him, but on the third day he will rise again. If I'm Paul, excuse me, are you talking about yourself? What is with all the he's and days? It's you. If it's just him and the disciples, why is he talking about himself like he's not right there? But I believe this is God speaking about Jesus through Jesus, and not Jesus speaking about himself to the disciples. He was fully God and fully man. And again, through reading, it's like perfection was seen through the completion of the assignment that God saw was good and necessary. That means perfection isn't static. It changes. It's malleable to what God wants and requires. And the reason that is because we have free will. So everything isn't exactly what we think it is, which is why we have to be obedient to what God is telling us. That's how you hit perfection. Now, I'm not saying that we are going to go out and be perfect. Take the attention off being perfect, how you think you should be, and put the focus on being obedient. And watch how much better things are because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. This is called alignment. That comes from complete submission and obedience to God at all times. You have to be obedient to the updated instruction, whatever God is saying you need to do. And Jesus is sitting there talking about himself in the third person, explaining what's about to happen. And then verse 34 says, but they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. You know what? I would fail to grasp what he's talking about too. Because why is this man sitting here talking in the third person about himself, and we standing right here and he's standing right here too? I don't think that they were meant to grasp that in that moment, because I don't think that that was meant for them. I think that interaction was meant for us to be reading now. That's just me. That's just what I think. Because we can read it from the perspective of knowing the complete story already. Whereas the disciples were told the complete story, but they hadn't seen it play out yet. So they can't fully understand the importance of everything that's going on until it's already done. Which is why perfection is in the obedience that Jesus had in the completion of the plan. And the same principle can be applied to our lives. Focus on being obedient to what God tells you. The reason why is going to be hidden to the people around you because they can't see the full story while you're in it. But if you stay in alignment, you can be perfect for what God intended you for. And when you get knocked out of alignment, Jesus made it so you can hop right back in. That should free somebody's mind. Cue the Tim's free your mind. You don't have to get every action right. But what you do have to do is be obedient to what God is telling you. That's how to be perfect. Not perfect how you think perfect is, but perfect in a way that's pleasing to God. Man! And now I just had another moment. Destiny, in her comment on the last joint, she said, how do I live a life pleasing to God? And I didn't know how to answer that question because I genuinely didn't feel like my life was pleasing to God. So how I'm gonna sit here and tell Destiny how to live a life pleasing to God when I don't know how to do that? And it's right here in our obedience. Bam! Destiny, I'm tagging you again. This was a comment left on the last video from Destiny. She also asked about how to live a life pleasing to God, but I can't do all that in one video. I'm just gonna be like, yeah, little Dez, I'm tagging you again. This the answer to that. I didn't even know. Like, I promise it wasn't until this moment in the video that I realized I just answered that question. It's titled How to Be Perfect. That's how you live a life pleasing to God. Through your obedience. I'm gone. Hey.